Today's topic, Roth IRA strategies for physicians that you may not have thought of yet. Roth IRAs, personally, are probably my favorite investment tool to utilize. And as physicians, we're probably very used to hearing the word, at least Backdoor Roth IRA. But do you remember the old commercials like the Incredible Edible Egg? That's really how I think of the Roth. It is so incredible. It has so many benefits and so many ways you can utilize it. But most of us don't know all the benefits. We've only heard of the Backdoor Roth IRA, which is a fantastic start because ultimately most of these strategies are assuming that you've built up a good amount of Roth assets. So I'm going to walk through some strategies that maybe you've heard of, maybe some you've never thought of, and some that are maybe a little bit further down the road that you didn't give any thought to. We'll start with a small intro on what Roths are. Again, I'll give you some tidbits on the Backdoor Roth IRA. But after that, we are going to get into some unique strategies, some super nerdy stuff. This is probably one of the more detailed blog posts that we have written in quite some time, which is trying to take it to that next level. I feel like a lot of our old posts and older videos have done a great job of covering high-level topics that are very broad. But now as we continue to progress, I want to try to add more and more layers and more complexity, as I assume your situations may be getting more complex. So stay tuned. That is all coming up next. All right, let's ease into it. What is a Roth IRA? Probably a pretty good start before we get into some crazy strategies. For all intents and purposes, a Roth IRA is just an investment account. I would say think of these as umbrellas. For a Roth IRA to work, you are putting in after-tax dollars. You've already paid Uncle Sam. You're getting tax-deferred growth while it's in there. And when you take it out, assuming that's a qualified withdrawal, which is more or less the 5-year, 59.5 type rules that come into play here, and they come in different levels too. But at that point, completely tax-free. Why is this unique? Well, we don't know what tax rates are going to be, heck, at the end of next year, let alone 20, 30 years from now. So a Roth just allows us to build up, I call them buckets, allows us to build up another bucket of assets that we can adjust for as we get later down the road because we just don't know what tax rates are going to be. Now, as physicians, we're used to hearing the term Backdoor Roth IRA. And what is a Backdoor Roth IRA? Well, really, it's all the same thing. It's just more or less how did you get money into the Roth IRA? On paper, pretty much most physicians, depending on if you're married or not married, but let's just assume most physicians can't go directly into a Roth IRA anymore because of the income limits that are put out there by the IRS. So what we have to do with our physicians are we have to put a non-deductible contribution into a traditional IRA, and then we convert it over to a Roth IRA. That little move there is really the Backdoor Roth IRA. There are some rules on why that's a little bit different, and I'll explain those as I kind of work my way through the strategies. But for all intents and purposes, there's two ways to get money into the Roth. Either directly through a contribution, if your income's low enough, or through a conversion. But the main goal is just to build up Roth IRAs. Now, you'll also have other opportunities throughout your career, right? If your hospital allows a traditional 403 but a Roth 403b, they likely will allow you to convert a portion to your Roth. When would you do this? Well, you got to be strategic here, right? Because again, physician household, probably a higher tax bracket. When you can look at it, if markets are getting crushed, if you had a year where maybe your tax bracket was lower, or maybe we just got a pleasant surprise on tax updates, maybe you have some windows in there where you can actually convert some from pre-tax to Roth. Ideally, I would say when the market's really getting hit hard, that's like your best time to look at it because you can convert it while the market's low and then get the upside potential. But either way, that is your intro to a Roth. We'll call it Roth IRA 101. Now let's hit some of the better, more detailed strategies. All right, number one, a savings tool for young investors. I would think of this in more terms of you're just getting started as an investor. Don't think of this as kids per se or grandkids. So you're a resident physician. You're a fellow right now. You're likely underneath the income limit, so you can save directly to a Roth. Even if you had to do a Backdoor Roth IRA, it still works out well here. But it works better in this example if you can actually save directly to it. So an actual contribution, not a conversion. Remember, Backdoor Roth IRA is a conversion, and that's important, and I'll tell you why in a second. But when you go directly to the Roth IRA, I don't quote Susie Orman often, She's built an empire, fabulous woman. I just don't agree with all the words that she put out there. But I will say this is one that I've always utilized from her, that she tells young investors to really use the Roth IRA as an emergency fund. Again, I don't love it per se because I think it should be different. But here's why I do like how she says that. Because anything you put into the Roth IRA, assuming it went directly into it, is always accessible. So what you put in, you can take out if it went directly into the Roth. So she would tell individuals, young individuals, to do that as an emergency fund, because more than likely, hopefully, you wouldn't actually tap into it. So you're actually saving for the long term, but you're not even thinking of it that way. So sometimes it kind of just gets you over that barrier. So it's a great tool for young investors. And here's the point I keep saying. So remember, you can do a direct contribution or you can do a conversion. Here's why this is really important though. If you can go directly to the Roth, again, no backdoor Roth IRA, directly to it, you don't have the 5-year rule. And that's important because if you did need to get access to the money, you can always get what you put in. So if you put in $6,000 in the year 2021 and it went directly into a Roth, you always have access to that $6,000. Now, if it grew to $7,000, the $7,000 of gains you do not have access to. That's where you're going to have the early withdrawal penalties, 59.5 comes into play. That part is kind of always on its own retirement island. Now let's take that same example, but assume that you did a backdoor Roth IRA. Same $6,000, but it first went into the IRA and then you converted it. Keyword, you converted it over to your Roth IRA. As soon as you did that conversion, you introduced a 5-year rule. And this is important because you no longer have direct access to that money. This problem pops up most of the time for our physicians that are finishing up training and they're going to become an attending. You usually have that cutoff around June, July, August, where you don't have a full year of attending pay, but still your income's getting really close. And this is the year that you should really micromanage that number, because if you can still go directly into the Roth, it's going to benefit you. Don't just do a backdoor Roth IRA to do it. If your income's too high, of course do it. Or if you think you're going to be really, really close and more than likely, sure. But we're trying to avoid that 5-year rule. So again, let's just assume it was a conversion. You put $6,000 into the IRA, you convert it over to your Roth. That $6,000 now has 5-year weight on it. You can't get to that money for 5 years without a penalty. Let's just say it also grew to $7,000. Well, not only do you have the 5-year weight on the initial $6,000, but even the $1,000 of gain, the gains are always on their separate island. So you still, again, 59.5 rules are coming into play. Really, anything from a gain perspective in a Roth is always going to have to be considered retirement. So, number one, this is why a Roth is a great savings tool for young investors. So take advantage of that as soon as you can. And I usually say that earlier in your career, you can likely get directly to a Roth, which even gives you more options at that point. All right, number two is a really neat strategy, but it likely only pertains to a very small subsector of you that are watching this. If you own your own practice, this is a really unique strategy here. So because of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, the way that we get the QBI or the 199A deduction, it is based on your taxable income. So this is a unique opportunity where what you were saving to your retirement plan may be better off in these certain times right now. I think this goes until the sunset in 2025, where you could actually do more Roth contributions because it makes your taxable income higher. But remember, you're getting essentially a 20% tax deduction on that QBI, or the 199A. So that's where it's really unique. If you really want to get into it, you could also possibly look at your current bucket and convert pre-tax to Roth. Also increases your taxable income, but also gets that deduction. So this is a really unique strategy. I would not just wing this one and just say, oh, well, I read this blog post or saw this YouTube video. This is one where I would certainly be working with your accountant and with your financial advisor. Kind of find those income limits, see where you could benefit from it. But the 199A introduced a whole new world of options on how to take advantage of this. But it really pertains to those small practices where you can really get in there and kind of tweak things around. But keep an eye on this. Something you can take advantage of. Probably one of the more unique strategies that came out of the recent Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. But I would certainly dig into this with your accountant and your financial advisor for sure. Number three, trying to prioritize tax-free withdrawals. This is one of my favorite strategies. This is one strategy that we put in play with most of our baby boomer clients. So our physicians that are a little bit later down the road, maybe they just retired, they haven't started their RMDs yet, or we're trying to think through this in advance for some of our later year attending physicians where we know retirement is starting to get near here. But the main goal here is we're trying to see, are there certain years when we look at your current effective tax rate, future effective tax rate, are there certain years that we can convert pre-tax to Roth and take advantage of that in the long run? And I call them the golden years. And the golden years are this. The golden years are from the year that you retire to when you're forced to take RMDs, which as we sit here right now, it's age 72. So if you retire at 65 and you have RMDs at 72, you have a 7-year window where you are likely in a lower tax bracket, and you may have a fantastic opportunity to get in there and convert pre-tax to post-tax. And here's why I say I think this is vital for our baby boomers. The Roth is somewhat of a newer investment vehicle. So for many of our physicians that have amassed, millions of dollars of net worth, the Roth wasn't really around all that long. They weren't doing backdoor Roth IRAs, in the 80s. So it's one of those things where we're consistently playing catch up. So one of our best opportunities to really catch up is in those golden years. So if you're watching this video and you're getting close to retirement or near retirement, review this with your advisor, your tax accountant, and see, are there years right now where your effective tax rate might drop down to 10, 12, 15%, but later down the road, those RMDs force you into a higher tax bracket and you bump up to 20%. Well, if you can convert pre-tax to Roth at 10% compared to 20% down the road, 10% tax arbitrage, take that all day. Heck, if you can get 5%, 3% tax arbitrage, take that all day. Again, you're using assumptions. That's kind of the tricky part with anything Roth-based is you're using assumptions for the future, but you should have a pretty good idea what's going on. But this is one of my favorite strategies. Again, physicians, non-physicians, I think everyone should be looking at this. Again, if this is something your advisor has not brought up to you, talk about this. Obviously, it's looking a little bit further out or maybe a few years down the road, but just a fantastic strategy to get more pre-tax over to Roth. And remember, when you do that, it's also going to lower your RMDs. So it's going to lower how much you're being forced to pull out, age 72 plus. So number 3 is one of my favorites, so give that a good look as well. Number 4 is really related to education savings. And here's where it comes into play. So if your child, I would think of it this way. I would not use your Roth for this. Sometimes that comes up. I'm not in love with that idea. I think the Roth is too vital. I think it's the most precious thing we have in our toolbox of investment accounts. But here's how we look at it with a lot of our clients, where kids are a little bit older. We're putting into the 529 plan, probably getting the full state tax benefit, assuming our state offers it. And they'll come back to us and they'll say, well, what next? Or what if the cost of education comes down? I don't want everything tied up in this 529 plan. What else can we do? And this is a fantastic opportunity that if your child has earned income, it would be great if they put the money into the Roth IRA, but let's just say they don't, and you want to keep saving for them. You could essentially open up a Roth IRA for them, and then let's just say they had, $10,000 of earned income from working the summer at the pool. You could put in the $6,000 into the Roth IRA for them. The IRS doesn't really know where the money came from, right? They know that they had earned income, so then they're allowed to save to the Roth. But you could start building up assets inside of this Roth. They would now, again, you would argue here, the Roth IRA is going to be in their name. So when it comes to a FAFSA form, we get hit here. But I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but usually as a physician, your household income is likely going to knock you out of any type of needs-based financial aid. So I wouldn't worry about it too much, but again, put it on your radar. But let's just say that you know that financial aid is not going to be part of the picture. That Roth IRA could be fantastic. Not only could you utilize it down the road for education, but let's just say that they get a scholarship or the 529 plan took care of it because instead of Penn, they went to Penn State. Whatever the example would be, the Roth IRA could just be a huge head start for them. You could utilize it for other things as well, but remember, that is one benefit. And in this example, your child's income is not too high, so you're going directly to the Roth. So the contribution portion is accessible. That's the key here, which is why I don't want this to really be anything involved with you. This is really just based on your child having income. You're already taking advantage of the 529 plan, but just don't forget, a Roth IRA in your child's name, if they have that earned income, could be a fantastic tool, whether it's for education, whether it's just a head start in life. Don't forget about that strategy. That is another good one to keep an eye on. Number 5. We're getting into the weeds here. This is a very cool strategy. This is referring to early financial independence, really early retirement, I guess I should word it as early retirement for our baby boomer clients. Or again, those of you that will be baby boomers, or I shouldn't say be baby boomers at some point, but we're all going to retire, right? So we're starting to think in advance. So if you retire at an early age, for the most part, let's assume we can't get to investment accounts without a penalty before 59 and a half. Now, there are certainly certain rules, right? If the money's in your 401k, 403b, you have an age 55 rule. There's a rule called a 72T where you're taking equal periodic distribution. So there are ways to get to it. But here's a really neat idea. If you took time over your working career to build up Roth assets, and you had a period of time where you had to pull income out to live off of, right? Because you can't get to your traditional means, Social Security hasn't started, maybe pensions haven't started, whatever your scenario would be. If you utilize the Roth, remember the Roth does not show up as taxable income. You can also have a chance then to get very, very good tax credits to help you on your health insurance. Because remember, pre-65, you don't have Medicare. Let's assume your employer didn't have a good plan in place because we just don't see them all that often anymore. So you retire before 65, you start pulling money out of your Roth just to kind of make ends meet. Your income's extremely low, and the Roth is not showing up on paper. So in those years without Medicare, you have a chance to take advantage of current tax law. You can take advantage of the tax credits, which will help you keep your health insurance costs extremely low until you hit 65. But the only way this is possible is if you were diligent and adamant on actually building up Roth assets. So the more Roth assets you can build up, especially if you're going for early retirement, really, really neat tool, could end up saving you thousands of dollars in just health insurance cost by putting this strategy in place. Not to mention your tax bill is much lower because, again, you're using your Roth, not any other forms of income. So number 5, we call it providing a safety net for physicians who dream of early retirement. Really neat stuff here. So give this a look, see if it pertains to you. If it does, the key thing is make sure you're building up enough Roth assets to actually take advantage of this. Number 6, another super nerdy but super valuable lesson here. So we call it avoiding the tax dark horses like IRMAA and net investment income tax. So IRMAA is the Medicare income related monthly adjustment amount. Sorry, I got to use my cheat sheet there because I usually fumble those words. For short, we're going to call it IRMAA for the rest of the way. What happens here? Well, your Medicare Part B premiums, technically your Medicare Part D as well, can have a surcharge attached to them. And that surcharge is based on your income. And you're probably going to say, Chad, well, what is that? What do you mean from income? Well, if you're married, filing single, this is based on 2021 limits. The income limit is $88,000. Married filing jointly is $176,000. Again, got to use my cheat sheets here. But these are cliffs. They're cliffs. So if you go over by $1 increases your premium every single month for Medicare Part B and Part D if you're using Part D. So this is such a vital thing to pay attention to, and it's a 2-year look back. So 2021, we look back to 2019. 2022, we look back to 2020. Now, if certain things happen, like let's just say you got a big bonus, or I shouldn't say a big bonus, like a big buyout offer, or you got paid your sick leave, there is a form. Did we put that in the blog post? We did not list it, but there is a form that you can send in, and we've done this with a few clients. And they pretty much said, hey, we get it. We're not going to increase it. We realized that was more or less a one-time event that happened at retirement. But either way, you got to pay attention to these things. Because, again, it's a cliff. So as soon as you go over by $1, it doesn't matter. You pay the higher premium amounts. And they're locked in for that entire year. And that can continue going forward every single year. So every year that you're over, so again, say that they did a 2-year look back from this year, 2019. But let's just say 2022, you were over again. That'll apply then again for the next year. So you really got to pay attention to these things. But this is a huge part where the Roth is extremely valuable. Because if you're getting really close to that limit and you say, well, sugar, I still need more money. What do I do? Well, if you have the Roth, you can utilize the Roth because it's not going to show up as income. So just make sure you're paying attention to that. Same thing applies to the net investment income tax, which is currently at 3.8%. This is based on interest, dividends, capital gains, rental income, etc. Here's your limits. $2,000 if filing single. Downside is the married side does not get a big bump here. It's $250,000 for married filing jointly. So 2 really big things to pay attention to. But if you have not built up Roth assets throughout your working career or started to do conversions later, you could be in a tough spot. And I can tell you that we have worked with clients that come to us for a one-time plan or currently working with us where everything is pre-tax and we don't have really anywhere to go, and they're paying these extra taxes, and we try to figure out ways to get below, but it sometimes it's just too hard to do it. There's just not enough wiggle room in there. So again, big thing here is you got to build up the Roth assets to even be able to put these strategies in play. Number 7 is just the extra flexibility that comes with a Roth. So again, the main thing that we noted earlier, right? If you're making contributions directly to the Roth, so not a backdoor Roth IRA, you have direct access to that money immediately. If it's coming from the form of a conversion, you have a 5-year wait. So backdoor Roth IRA, 5-year wait. If you converted pre-tax to Roth, 5-year wait. The other items that you get benefits to is, remember, thanks to the Secure Act, you can also get money out early for a first-time home purchase, college expenses, even starting a family with a birth or adoption. So Roth just add extra flexibility. And really, to kind of go back to Roth IRA 101, to get the gains, to get access to the gains, here are the 2 rules you have to follow. You have to have the account open for at least 5 years. Now, the unique thing here is it depends on when that first contribution was. So even if you made a contribution at the very end of 2021, it still counts for the entire year of 2021, which is a neat little trick, which is why we usually tell all of our clients, again, fortunately working with clients pretty much, I don't even think pretty much every single client has a Roth IRA. The year that we opened that, we already started that 5-year clock. And that carries on with you forever. You always have that 5-year clock. And then after that, though, so let's just assume you had it open for 5 years. Here's the kicker, right? Over 59 and a half, or a disability, or if you passed away and the account went to a beneficiary. So that's usually the biggest issue for our clients, usually being younger, that Gen X, Gen Y population, but we do have our boomer clients as well. But with that, 59 and a half is usually the big hurdle, right? We're just not there yet. Even if we had the account open for 20 years, we're just not at that 59 and a half just yet. So another big benefit to the Roth is it just gives you flexibility. And with flexibility, I hope you don't need it. I hope none of those things ever pop up for you, that you need to get forced access to the funds. But if you do, you have some options there. All right, number 8. I won't say last because I still have a few more things I want to go over, but last one, an estate planning tool. If you had to pick an account to die with, besides life insurance, your Roth IRA is your best option because it's completely tax-free. Completely tax-free to your heirs. And we have this strategy in play for a lot of clients. We have clients that are willing to convert pre-tax to Roth, pay the tax bills now just so that they can pass money to their heirs with no taxes on it. They just get the money, no taxes are due. So it's just a great estate planning tool. It's one of those where, if you had to leave one account behind, it's your Roth. It's also one of the ones that we usually leave as our last bucket, not because we're trying to leave it behind, but more or less because it's given us more time for compounding growth to try to make the after-tax bucket even larger. So usually when we talk through our bucket approach, the Roth is last in line there. But if it's there forever, you didn't get through that entire bucket, great investment to leave behind for your heirs. So number 8, which is technically our last numbered one here. I'm going to go through a few more items before I close up. It's just a great estate planning tool. All right, just a few tidbits to close here. So why do I love Roth IRAs for Gen X and Gen Y physicians? First one, I'm going to go, if you're reading our blog post, this is the section we call In a Nutshell. Tax-free sources of retirement income. Fantastic. Take advantage of lower tax brackets now. Have more flexibility throughout your retirement. I really do think Gen X and Gen Y physicians at this phase have a huge leg up on our parents, on older physicians, because the Roth IRA has really been popular throughout our entire, our career so far. So we knew about the Roth way earlier than what our parents, what our colleagues, our older colleagues, our older attending colleagues, it wasn't popular back then. So we have a huge head start there. Now, for my baby boomers, here's why I love, for my baby boomers, I think a lot of those strategies you saw, the power really, it compounds over time, where you get more flexibility, more strategies to put in play as you get older and you have these Roth IRA assets. So big items I listed here: bypass the RMDs. Again, RMDs can be a tricky part of financial plans if you're not preparing for them. They can literally force you into higher tax brackets. Lower sources of taxable income in retirement. Preserve retirement savings for the future. Those are really the items in a nutshell. But either way, Whether you are in medical school or you've been attending for 25 years and you're getting ready to retire next week, a Roth IRA is just a fantastic tool from start to finish. And I keep saying Roth IRA, but remember, this can, if you have a Roth 401k, if you have a Roth 403b, same thing. You just want to build up as many Roth assets as you can while still paying attention to tax laws and things of that nature, and the idea of you're in a high income tax bracket. So there's still, on paper, makes a lot of sense to defer as much as you can, but take advantage of the Roth as much as you can as well. It's finding that equilibrium, kind of thinking about today, but also tomorrow. There you have it. Eight unique strategies that maybe we have not thought of, or maybe we've heard about but didn't get the details on. Again, I think as physicians, we're used to hearing the term backdoor Roth IRA, which is a huge part of pretty much every one of these strategies. But you got to actually start to build up the Roth for even most of these, more beneficial strategies to really show up later down the road. So, as I noted, the Roth IRA is really, I think, one of the most powerful investment tools out there. I'd say it's my favorite just because of how much flexibility it has, which is why, again, most of our clients are doing backdoor Roth IRAs. We look to see if there are conversion opportunities. So, moral of the story, the Roth IRA is a fantastic tool. It can help you with many strategies down the road, and sometimes we're not thinking 20, 30 years down the road. That's where we come in, right? That's why you pay us the big bucks. But that's what we're trying to think through further out there. So take advantage of the Roth. If you have not started using it, I hope this kind of gives you a nudge in the right way. If you have been thinking about using it, hopefully, again, you're starting to use it now. If you've been utilizing it, maybe there's other places to utilize it. Maybe you're doing one for yourself, but you haven't started doing one for your spouse. Again, depending on your tax bracket, maybe Roth 401k, maybe Roth 403b. Usually for most of our physicians, just based on their tax bracket, we're doing all pre-tax there, but always doing the backdoor Roth IRA, but keeping an eye out for any conversion opportunities from pre-tax to Roth inside of those qualified plans. As always, thanks for tuning in. If you have not liked this video, give this a like. If you have not subscribed to our channel, please subscribe. You'll get a little notification every time we send out a very helpful video like this one. And by you doing the like or subscribe, it also gets our videos in front of more physicians, which helps more physicians, and we continue to help our favorite people in the world, our physicians. So as always, again, thanks for tuning in, and I will catch you on the next video.